John chapter 14, verses 1 to 11. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Jesus said to him, Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, Show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or else believe on the account of the works themselves. This is the reading of the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thanks, Julie. This sermon is called I Am the Way, the Truth, and the Life, and it is a continuation of the series that is continuing through these weeks on Jesus' I am statements. And so we are at the heart of who Jesus says that he is this morning. And so again, this week, Jesus stops us in our tracks with a radical claim. This is actually an earth-shattering claim that I am the way, the truth, and the life. And this is one of the most important teachings of Jesus that we receive in the Gospels, period, end of statement. It draws the line between those who accept the truth of Jesus and those who reject the truth of Jesus. So today, I want to address very specifically, because of the line that Jesus himself draws. This is not an arbitrary line that we draw or that any person has the authority to draw. It's Jesus himself. I want to address one of the biggest challenges of our time, and it is indeed the skeptic's challenge of our time, that truth is relative and there is no real right and wrong. It is the absolute rejection of Jesus' statement that he is the truth. And it goes like this: I am who I am, and I must be left to live how I want. I am, not Jesus is, the captain of my ship. I am the captain, not God. The modern secular mantra is believe what you want and you do you. That's the colloquialism. That's the, word on the street. That's the average Joe's way of saying this, is that you do you. You believe what you want. And the question, I think that is kind of obvious to answer is, have you ever felt the magnetic pull of that kind of thought or that kind of reasoning? And I think we can all relate to that this morning, that message is a message that draws us. And it draws us because in our fallen nature, we want the world to be all about me. We want the world to revolve around us. So, of course, there's a magnetic pull there because it's drawing us into the depth of our fallen humanity. And it tickles the ears. It sounds good on the surface. It actually sounds great on the surface. Just do what you want. Why are you going to be tied to somebody like Jesus who lays down these kinds of statements of identity and calls you, like we said, to surrender and to submit to him and to pick up your cross? Like, who wants that? Right? This message of you do you, it tickles your ears, right? But it's ultimately self-serving. It ultimately leads us to a place of slavery. So a promise of freedom is offered, but what we get is slavery. And, just to change the metaphor a little bit, it's like candy, right? This message that we hear all the time is like candy. It's sweet and tasty in the mouth, but it's heavy in the stomach. And if you eat a lot of it, you're going to feel it, man. Like, you're going to feel it in your gut. It has no nutritional value. It's just junk food for the human heart and mind and soul and body. When I started pastoring in 2005, I spent a lot of time with university students, and I actually served as a campus pastor at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, for those who don't know that about my story. And I'm really grateful for that. I started off in my Christian life serving younger students, grade 7s and 8s, when I was just discerning ministry, and then I transitioned over into university ministry. And I did that because I really felt called to just be with the younger generation and wrestle through these questions. Like, wrestle with the messaging of our time in a secular environment, in a secular university context, so that I could figure out how to interact with people around these things. And it was a really, really challenging time in my life, those 7 years that I spent doing that. And I met people like this 19-year-old guy, Andrew. I met lots of people like this, but, I just want to share with you a little bit of his story this morning because it helps to get at this from kind of like a non-technical perspective, like a person's life, right? And so Andrew, he was doing an undergraduate degree in the social sciences. So early on, he was one of those students that kind of realized, I'm taking a degree that's probably going to take me nowhere. It's going to leave me with a lot of debt, and then I'm just going to get a job that I could have got if I hadn't have spent the $50,000, right? It's that kind of a degree. So, he's doing something because he's going for truth and beauty, and he wants education. He was the son of a preacher. He was a smart kid. He grew up in the church, and he was a good guy. But when he got to university and he started to hear this messaging that I'm talking about here, like everything he knew and he grew up with was challenged at the core, like on a foundational level, right away. So he goes into class, and he's taught that God doesn't exist, right? That's like the first thing that you hear when you go into the secular humanities in a secular university context if you get the wrong teacher. The Bible's full of silly myths, and Sigmund Freud explained away all religious belief as wish fulfillment, right? That's what you get. You go into your psych class, you go into your sociology class, you go into your philosophy class, and you're smacked in the face with this stuff. Then his philosophy professor teaches him the very specific idea of relativism. Relativism. that truth is what you make it. Your truth is different than my truth, and my truth is different than your truth. And who am I to judge, and who are you to judge? You do you. His professor said, there's no ultimate truth. So this Jesus business, I am the way, the truth, and the life, put it aside, Andrew, right? There's no ultimate truth, and there's no moral law. So you need to see the connection this morning between these two things in our society and culture today. If you reject ultimate truth, then what is the foundation for morality? There is no foundation. So there's no moral law. There's only social constructs. That's what people say. Have you heard them say that before? Social constructs, right? Which means that you make up the morality based on your social or political context or your cultural context or your preferences. It's all about you. All truth claims are relative to a certain culture, or worse, they are a ploy to gain power. You hear a lot about that today too, right? You're going after power. So you're going to use truth to gain power. And then, if you believe that, you can apply that back all the way through life in any context that you want. So Andrew often heard people say in his class and in his peer group, that's true for you, but it's not true for me. There's no truth, in fact. There's just opinion and bias. And so now you see that there's the contradiction starts to sneak in here, right? Because I'm like, hey, wait a minute, isn't that a truth claim? Right? If you tell me that there's no truth and it's only bias and it's only opinion, then you're stating the truth. Which, unfortunately for Andrew, and I'm sure that there's many in this room that can relate with this, it put him squarely into the category of the ignorant and the intolerant Christian. The person who says, I believe that Jesus is the truth. Not just that he teaches truth, but that he actually is the truth. And the weight of that judgment was bearing down on Andrew. So he recoiled into a double life. And again, I'm sure there's many people in this room or online who can relate with this, the double life. So around his Christian friends, he is a faithful Christian, and then he's the silent skeptic around his classmates. And who could blame him? Who honestly can blame a person like this, 19 years old? Because he's being pulled in two directions. He's being split, right? And he doesn't know what to do. And so this is one of the most important things I can say today, and it's been hinted at throughout worship already this morning. And it's that you got to have community, right? It's this interaction right here. It's the discussion. It's the dialectic. It's the place where you can go to talk to other people. It's the place where you can go to pray with people. And you can learn other things, and you can test this stuff, not by yourself and in isolation. And so one day, Andrew got connected with our campus ministry community, which happened with many students, and it was life-giving for him. It truly was. It was a place where he could face his fears and doubts and questions in a supportive community. It's where you can put all this stuff out, right? And you can get that feedback. You can test it. You can get people to fortify you in the truth. So we helped him to see the self-defeating nature of relativism, which is the part of it that a lot of people don't want to talk about. They just want the candy. You see, you cannot deny the reality of ultimate truth while claiming that relativism is true for everyone. It's a contradiction. It's what Jesus said, build your house on the rock, not on the sand. This is building your house on the sand. Going around telling people that there's no ultimate truth and then claiming that relativism is the truth. Just because we live in a pluralistic society, my friends, it does not mean that truth is relative. Just because we live in a pluralistic society where there's differences, there's different opinions, there's different religions, there's different worldviews, it does not necessarily mean that truth is relative. It means that people are different. It means that people have different beliefs. It means that people grow up in different places around the world, yes. And from a Christian worldview perspective, it means that truth for us in relation to all of these things, which is the revelation that Jesus gave, that truth has a face. And it is the face of the crucified and risen Jesus. It's not just an argument. It's not just a discussion. It's not just a debate in the philosophy classroom. It's a person. It's Jesus himself. That's his radical claim. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I transcend all the cultures, all the nationalities, all the differences, all of the arguments, all the questions. Fully God and fully man, Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, calls us to follow his way of being human. Not just his way of thinking, but his way of being. And that is the heart and the center of his teaching in John 14. Follow me. Which leads to the important question. Our second question this morning about the skeptic's challenge. Is there real right and wrong? Jesus doesn't just say, believe in me intellectually and accept me as the truth. He says, follow me. The rejection of ultimate truth in our society and culture has led to the idea of ethical relativism. So it's not just relativism in general or as it applies to the claims of truth, but also in terms of morality. So it spills over into here. So there is no absolute set of moral principles because moral standards, again, are culturally defined. Are you tracking with me here? This is very, very important. If truth is relative and anything goes, and your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, then morality itself is just always swirling around cultural definitions and preferences, not loyalty to a person who claims to be truth. See that? Those who embrace this worldview often say, we hear it all the time, who are you to judge? To each their own, just leave people alone. To each their own, leave them alone. So many people now believe in our world that there is no right and wrong, only personal preference, which tragically leads to an unbearable set of contradictions and a mess of harms. This happens all over the place now. Although the topic of ethical relativism, it makes for an interesting classroom debate, it's an epic fail when tested by real life experiences. How does it work out in the real world? Across cultures, we're witnessing that human beings are created to reason morally. That's what we see in the real world. And it's what's being challenged in the academic world. We are created to reason morally. It's how we organize healthy families and societies. And so the risk in all of this is that if we cease to reason morally, then how are you going to organize yourself in terms of humanity, in terms of the family, in terms of society, and in terms of culture? So let's get very practical here in the family, in terms of ethical relativism, moral relativism. If a child starts screaming at her mother and hitting her or pinching her breast, does the mother say, "It's okay, sweetie, you do whatever you want. It's just who you are. You do you"? Like, hello? No. Or maybe you do, because we're seeing that happen now. Well, we'll see how that plays out over the next 2 generations, won't we? It's not what people used to do, but it is now what people are advocating doing. Harm to the mother? It's not just who you are. No, in fact, what we should do and what a good mother would do is teach her child that hitting and pinching are wrong. Thank you. Right and wrong. Where's the foundation here? Is there a foundation? It's part of the question of our time. From the time of infancy, most people display an innate sense of right and wrong, unless we have serious cognitive problems, which is a totally separate issue that we have to talk about separately. We live by the law of fair play. And when someone steps out of line, we naturally call them out. 2 kids are playing in the playground, and one snatches the ball out of the other one's hands. And all the kids yell, "Hey, that's not..." Thank you. Why? Because they don't believe in moral and ethical relativism. They believe in right and wrong. They believe in fair play. And the children are right. They instinctively appeal to the natural moral law when someone comes and steals their stuff. It's what it means to be human. A group of children are told to line up single file, right? All the ECEs and the teachers are going to love this one. Okay? And one kid arrogantly goes and butts in front of all the rest of them. And what do the children say? "Hey, that's not..." They don't say, "That's just who Johnny is, and he can do whatever he wants." It's not what the children say at all. It's the total opposite. And some of them might go and thump Johnny too, right? I can see people are like this part, right? So one last one. You're an adult. So there's the children, and they get it intuitively, and they act it out. But what about the adults? So someone swears you out to your face. Someone gossips about you behind your back. Someone steals your stuff. Or someone tries to cancel you on the internet or at school or at work or wherever. And you instinctively respond in terms of the natural law, in terms of justice, because you are a human being created in the image of Jesus. You do not say, "Well, I live in a world defined by moral relativism, so you can do whatever you want to me. You can cause me whatever harm you want, and I'm just going to lay down and be a doormat and take it." That's not what you do if you're on the side of truth, if you're on the side of justice, if you're on the God side of things. You know, Jesus, and how does Jesus call us to work this out? Right? He doesn't call us to respond in kind. He doesn't call us to go and fight the person, or return evil for evil. He takes it way up to another level. He calls us to extend the love that is undeserved in the situation, not to avoid it, not to say, hey, you're good, you do whatever you want. No, to say, wait a minute, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This is a part of our fallen human nature. And God calls us to be truly human, to act justly, to love kindness, to love mercy, to show the person the way. That's what Jesus calls us to do. And that is the ultimate act of service, even for the enemy, to love. It's who he is. And so the problem with saying in society and culture that there's no real right and wrong is that the position hangs on the false belief that personal autonomy is all that matters, that I am of a law to myself, and that is not true. It's not true. It doesn't work. It's not how the world is structured. It's not how we feel. It's not how we naturally think. If we believe goodness is purely based on my definition, we must allow everyone to hold that position. And that, my friends, and here is the risk, results in chaos for the individual and society. And today we stand on the precipice. So like Jesus said, you best start counting the cost in these matters. We really should. Because we can keep going in this direction. And in fact, our secular society may keep running in this direction. Count the cost. If you dethrone Jesus, who claims to be the way, the truth, and the life, you must enthrone someone or something else. And it is often self. In Canada, it's almost always self. And so we end today with the Jesus way. I, not you, I, says Jesus, am the way, the truth, and the life. We may be tempted to feel like we are the way, the truth, and the life, and that it's all about us. But Jesus comes to us ever so lovingly, ever so kindly, but in true strength and courage of humanity and God, and says, it's me. And the translation of that in the Bible is, I am the true priest and prophet and king. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So what Jesus is saying is the way to God. He is the way to God, which means that he is our great high priest, who is the atoning sacrifice for our sin. He is the way. And Jesus is the embodiment of truth. Jesus is the Word of God and the true prophet. It's what the Gospel of John claims. And Jesus is also the life. He is the King of kings, and he is the sovereign ruler of creation. And so with King Jesus, the call is universal, but the way is specific. And this is what really triggers people these days. The call is universal for Jesus. It's extended to everyone. But the way is specific. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who want life, and I will give it. Come, all who are burdened and weighed down, and I will give you rest. I will give it generously and in abundance." But it's specific. It's me, says Jesus. And that's why we are called to lay our lives down. We are called to surrender everything, not to make everything about us, but to release our lives back to the Lord so that we can pick up and gain true and eternal life. No one comes to the Father but through me, says Jesus. And why is that? It's because Jesus paid it all for us. He took the sin of humanity upon himself as our representative, and he carried our burden all the way to the cross of Calvary. This is what we are about to celebrate right here in communion. This is the great symbol that he's left for us. The reminder that he's carried the burden all the way to Calvary, and that he has paid our debt in full as the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. Our sin left a crimson stain, and Jesus has washed us white as snow. That's what the truth looks like. He is the way to the Father's heart of love and forgiveness, and glory of all glories. He prepares a place for us in the Father's house when we choose to follow him. Let us pray.